المحاضرة هاي بنكمل عن Physiology of pregnancy. The earliest sign of pregnancy and the reason most pregnant women initially see a physician is missing a menstrual period. For sexually active women who are of reproductive age and have regular periods, a period that is more 1 week late is presumptive evidence of pregnancy. Pregnancy is considered to last 266 days from the time of conception or 280 days from the first day of the last menstrual period if the periods occur regularly every 28 days. Delivery date is estimated based on the last menstrual period. Delivery up to 2 weeks earlier or later than the estimated date is normal. Delivery before 37 weeks of gestation is considered preterm. Delivery after 42 weeks gestation is considered postterm. Oogenesis is the process of producing the female gametes, the ovum, from the primordial germ cells. The majority of the steps in oogenesis up to the point of producing primary oocyte occur prenatally. السلايد اللي أمامنا بورجينا the steps of oogenesis before birth and after birth. Oogenesis, ovum formation by meiosis and follicle of ovaries. Oogonia in fetal period in female rapidly divide and transform into primary oocyte in primordial follicles. Primary oocytes begin meiosis 1 but arrest in prophase 1. Starting at puberty, one follicle is chosen each month to complete meiosis 1, resulting in a secondary oocyte. Secondary oocyte begins meiosis 2 but arrests in metaphase 2. The secondary oocyte is ovulated into uterine tube. If fertilization occurs following sperm entry, meiosis 2 is completed, forming the ovum and another polar body. After ovulation occurs, the ovum with the granulosa cells is expelled into the peritoneal cavity. It enters the fallopian tube by passing through the fimbriated ends of each fallopian which fall around the ovaries. What helps the movement of ovum? First, by the inner surface of the fimbriated ends is lined with ciliated epithelium. The cilia are activated by estrogen, which causes them to beat toward the opening or ostium of the involved fallopian tubes. Second, by slow flow current flowing toward the ostium. Ova can even enter the opposite fallopian tube. Fertilization of the ovum. Few sperm reach the ampulla of the fallopian tube near the ovarian ends of the tubes during the intercourse. Transport of the ovum is aided by first, contraction of the uterus and fallopian tube stimulated by prostaglandins in the male seminal fluid. Second, oxytocin released from the posterior pituitary gland of the female during her orgasm. Site of fertilization of the ovum, the ampulla of one of the fallopian tubes. Sperm first penetrates the multiple layers of the granulosa cells, then sperm binds to and penetrates the zona pellucida. Once a sperm has entered the ovum, the secondary oocyte divide to form the mature ovum. The fertilized ovum contains 23 unpaired chromosomes of the male pronucleus and the 23 unpaired chromosomes of the female pronucleus. So a complete set of 46 chromosomes. Transport of the fertilized ovum in the fallopian tubes. After fertilization, 3 to 5 days is required for transport of the fertilized ovum through the remainder of the fallopian tubes into the cavity of the uterus. Transport is affected by, first, a weak fluid current in the tube resulting from the epithelial secretions, beating of the ciliated epithelium that lines the tube, weak contraction of fallopian tubes. The isthmus of the fallopian tube remains spastically contracted for about the first 3 days after ovulation. Progesterone secreted by the ovarian corpus luteum increases and activates progesterone receptors, leading to the isthmus relaxation, allowing entry of the ovum into the uterus. During fallopian transport, several stages of cell division occur, forming the blastocyst. Fallopian tube secretory cells produce large quantities of secretion used for the nutrition of the developing blastocyst. Blastocyst remains in the uterine cavity an additional 1 to 3 days before it implants in the endometrium. During this time, the blastocyst obtains its nutrition from the uterine endometrium secretions called uterine milk. Implantation normally occurs on about the 5th to 7th day after ovulation. Implantation results from the action invasion of trophoblast over the surface of the blastocyst. These cells secrete proteolytic enzyme that digest and liquefy uterine endometrium cells. Some of the fluid and nutrients released are utilized for a blastocyst growth. Trophoblast cells, uterine endometrium cells, and other blastocyst cells form the placenta and the various membrane of pregnancy. Progesterone aids in converting the endometrial stromal cells into large swollen cells containing extra quantities of glycogen, proteins, lipids, and even some mineral necessary for development of the conceptus, the embryo, and its adjacent parts or associated membranes. Nutrition sources. The trophoblast cells invade the decidua, digesting it. The stored nutrients in the decidua are used by the growing embryo. Decidual cells are the only source of nutrients to the embryo during the first week after implantation, continue up to 8 weeks. Second, the placenta begins to provide nutrition after about the 16th day after fertilization, 1 week after implantation. هذا السلايد بورجينا التروفوبلاستيك nutrition بالإضافة إلى البلاسنتال diffusion, duration of pregnancy. Function of the placenta. Trophoblastic cords attached to the endometrium form villi. Fetal blood capillaries grow into the trophoblastic cord. Maternal blood sinuses develop around the outside of the trophoblastic cord villi. Villi carrying fetal blood are surrounded by sinuses that contains maternal blood. So placenta is composed of fetal components and maternal components. Nutrients and other substances pass through this placental membrane mainly by diffusion. Permeability of the placenta. The major function of the placenta is to provide for diffusion of foodstuffs and oxygen from the mother's blood into the fetus blood and diffusion of excretory products from the fetus back into the mother. In early pregnancy, the placental membrane not fully developed, still thick and small surface area, so permeability is low. In later pregnancy, the permeability increases, thinning of the membranes and expansion of the surface area. Diffusion of oxygen through the placental membranes. Dissolved oxygen passes into the fetal blood by simple diffusion from maternal sinuses. Maternal blood means PO2 50 mm mercury. Fetal blood mean PO2 30 mm mercury. The mean pressure gradient for diffusion of oxygen through the placental membrane is about 20 mm mercury. This low fetal PO2 is still capable of supplying adequate oxygen to the fetal tissues. Hemoglobin, because hemoglobin of the fetus is mainly fetal hemoglobin, bind oxygen with greater affinity than the adult form. Hemoglobin concentration of fetal blood is about 50% greater than that of mother. And third, Bohr effect, hemoglobin can carry more oxygen at low PCO2 than it can at high PCO2, the double Bohr effect. Diffusion of CO2, foodstuffs and waste products through the placental membrane. Diffusion of CO2. PCO2 of the fetal blood is 2 to 3 mm mercury higher than that of the maternal blood. Extreme solubility of carbon dioxide in the placental membrane. Third, CO2 diffuses about 20 times as rapidly as oxygen. Diffusion of foodstuffs. Glucose facilitated diffusion carriers molecule in the trophoblast cells of the placental membrane, fatty acids, simple diffusion, ketone bodies, and potassium, sodium, chloride ions, Barlow simple diffusion. Excretion of waste products, non-protein nitrogen such as urea, uric acid, and creatinine, depend on diffusion gradient across the placental membrane and its permeability. Chorionic, human chorionogonadotropin HCG, secreted by the syncytial trophoblast cells into the fluids of the mother. 8 to 9 days after ovulation, shortly after implantation. Rate of secretion rises rapidly to reach a maximum at about 10 to 12 weeks of pregnancy. Secretion then decreases back to a lower value by 16 to 20 weeks, continues at this elevated level for the remainder of pregnancy. Function of a human chorionic gonadotropin. Human chorionic gonadotropin causes persistence of the corpus luteum and prevents menstruation. Continuous secretion of estrogen and progesterone by corpus luteum maintains the decidual nature of the uterine endometrium, which is necessary for the early development of the fetus. The corpus luteum involutes slowly after the 13th to 17th week of gestation. A human chorionic gonadotropin exerts an interstitial cell-stimulating effect on the testis of the male fetus, resulting in the production of testosterone in male fetuses until the time of birth. Fetal testosterone causes the fetus to grow male sex organs instead of female organs. Fetal testosterone causes the testes to descend into the scrotum. Secretion of estrogens by the placenta. The placenta, like the corpus luteum, secretes both estrogen and progesterone. Estrogens are formed from androgenic compounds, which are formed in the adrenal glands of the mother and the fetus and converted by the trophoblast cells into estradiol. Functions of estrogen in pregnancy: enlargement of the mother's uterus, enlargement of the mother's breast and growth of the breast ductal structure, enlargement of the mother's female external genitalia, relaxation of the pelvic ligaments of the mother, which allow easier passage of the fetus through the birth canal. Secretion of progesterone by the placenta. Estrogen is secreted in moderate quantities by the corpus luteum at the beginning of pregnancy, and later on in tremendous quantities by the placenta. Functions of progesterone in pregnancy: causes the residual cells to develop in the uterine endometrium, decreases the contractility of the pregnant uterus, contributes to the development of the conceptus even before implantation, because it increases the secretion of the mother's fallopian tubes and uterus to provide nutrients for the developing morula and blastocyst. Helps to prepare the mother's breast for lactation along with estrogen. Human chorionic somatomammotropin secreted by the placenta at about the 5th week of pregnancy. Secretion increases progressively throughout pregnancy in direct proportion to the weight of the placenta. Secreted in quantities several times greater than all the other pregnancy hormones combined. Possible important effects: causes decreased insulin sensitivity and decreased utilization of glucose in the mother. Promotes the release and utilization of free fatty acids for energy in the mother. Increase protein formation. Other hormonal factors in pregnancy: almost all the non-sexual endocrine glands of the mother react with pregnancy due to increased metabolic load on the mother and the effects of the placental hormone on the endocrine glands. Pituitary gland. Anterior pituitary gland enlarges and increases its production of corticotropin, thyrotropin, and prolactin. Secretion of FSH and LH is suppressed. Increased corticosteroid secretion. Increased secretion of glucocorticoids help mobilize amino acids from the mother tissue to be used for synthesis of tissues in the fetus. Increased secretion of aldosterone reabsorbs excess sodium from her renal tubules, leading to fluid retention that might cause pregnancy-induced hypertension. Thyroid gland. Increased thyroid gland secretion. Thyroid gland enlarges and increases its production of thyroxine due to the thyrotropic effect of placental human chorionic gonadotropin and secretion of placental human chorionic thyrotropin. Increased parathyroid hormone. Increased parathyroid hormone secretion enlarges and causes calcium absorption from the mother's bone, thereby maintaining normal calcium ion concentration in the mother's extracellular fluid, even while the fetus removes calcium to ossify its own bones. Secretion of relaxin by the ovaries and placenta, secreted by the corpus luteum of the ovary and by placenta, causes relaxation of the ligaments of the symphysis pubis, soften the cervix of the pregnant woman at the time of delivery. Response of mother's body to pregnancy. Weight gain in the pregnant woman about 25 to 35 pounds. Metabolic during pregnancy. The basal metabolic rate of the pregnant woman increases about 15% during the later half of pregnancy. Changes in the maternal circulatory system during pregnancy. Blood flow through the placenta and maternal cardiac output increases during pregnancy. Maternal blood volume increases during pregnancy due to aldosterone and estrogen and to increase fluid retention by the kidneys. Also, the bone marrow becomes increasingly active and produces extra red blood cells. Other maternal changes during pregnancy. Maternal respiratory during pregnancy. Mother's minute ventilation to increase. Progesterone increases respiratory center sensitivity to carbon dioxide. Growing uterus presses upward against the abdominal contents, which press upward against the diaphragm. Maternal kidney function during pregnancy. Rate of urine formation by a pregnant woman is usually slightly increased because of increased fluid intake and increased load of excretory products. Renal tubular reabsorptive capacity for sodium and chloride and water is increased. Renal blood flow and glomerular filtration rate increased due to renal vasodilation. Preeclampsia, toxemia, pregnancy-induced hypertension. Medical conditions in which hypertension arises in pregnancy in association with significant amount of protein in the urine. هذا بيحصل تقريبا 5% من all pregnancies. Pathophysiology, excess salt and water retention by the mother's kidney. Water gain and development of edema and hypertension in the mother. Impaired function of the vascular endothelium and arterial spasm. Renal blood flow and glomerular filtration rate are decreased. Thickened glomerular tuft that contains protein deposits in the basement membranes. Causes. Hormonal basis is still lacking. Autoimmune or allergy in the mother is caused by the presence of the fetus. Insufficient blood supply to the placenta, resulting in the placenta release of substances that cause widespread dysfunction of the maternal vascular endothelium. Eclampsia, an extreme degree of preeclampsia, characterized by, first, vascular spasm throughout the body, clonic seizures in the mother, sometimes followed by coma, greatly decreased kidney output, malfunction of the liver, sex, often extreme hypertension, and a generalized toxic condition of the body. It usually occurs shortly before birth of the baby. Management, vasodilating drugs, followed by immediate termination of pregnancy. هيك نكون خلصنا الفيزيولوجي of pregnancy. يعطيكم العافية.